The galaxy had rules. Unspoken, ancient, and deeply inconvenient for anyone who broke them. But rules nonetheless. You do not fire on unarmed vessels. You do not poison a planet's water supply during negotiations. And you absolutely, under no circumstances, touch a diplomat. Every civilization that had ever clawed its way up from stone tools to faster-than-light travel understood this. The Vorathi understood it. The Pelkani understood it. Even the Grunnic, who communicated exclusively through aggressive bioluminescent flashing and had no concept of personal space, understood it. The Kael'thari apparently did not get the memo, or maybe they got it, read it carefully, considered the implications, and then used it to line the bottom of a cage. Because on the 14th cycle of the Galactic Conclave's Peace Summit, Ambassador Yusra Okonkwo-Bell of the United Earth Diplomatic Corps was arrested, tried in a closed session lasting approximately 40 minutes, and publicly executed on the steps of the Kael'thari High Seat. Let me tell you something about Yusra Okonkwo-Bell. I had reviewed her file 3 times before this whole affair began, and each time I found myself staring at the screen with a sensation my species calls gorek, loosely translated as the feeling that something is significantly smarter than you and is politely pretending otherwise. She was 51 years old. She had negotiated the Tanev Accords, ended the peripheral border crisis with nothing but a legal pad and a thermos of something called black coffee, and once diffused a hostage situation on a Pelkani trade station by convincing both sides they were actually angry about the same thing. She wore her gray locks pinned back with a clip shaped like a hummingbird. She laughed loudly and without apology. She was, by every measurable standard, exactly the kind of human you did not want to make into a martyr. The Kael'thari made her into a martyr. The charges, by the way, were extraordinary. Espionage, cultural contamination, unauthorized deployment of emotional manipulation tactics. That last one is my personal favorite, because what the Kael'thari were describing under intense legal scrutiny was a human woman making eye contact and saying, "I understand your position, but let's talk about what you actually need." The nerve, the absolute audacity. I am Tevreth C., Senior Observer for the Galactic Conclave's Neutral Monitoring Division, and I was stationed aboard the observation platform above Kael Prime when all of this happened. My job, technically, was to document, observe, maintain neutrality, file reports in triplicate. I was very good at my job, right up until the moment the Kael'thari broadcast the execution on 17 open frequencies, and I found myself doing something my species only does in extreme emotional distress. I sat completely still and said nothing for 6 minutes, because I knew what came next. I knew because 18 months prior, I had attended a conclave briefing on Earth's military posture. I had read the strategic assessment on human conflict response. I had spoken to a Pelkani analyst who had spent 40 years studying humanity, and when I asked him what the most dangerous thing about humans was, he did not say their technology, their adaptability, or their numbers. He said, "They have a concept called enough." He explained it slowly, the way you explain something to someone you are genuinely concerned about. Most species, he said, operate on a spectrum of deterrence. Provoke them, they respond proportionally. Push harder, they push back harder. There is a logic to it, a negotiable mathematics. Humans do the same thing, right up until a threshold, invisible, personal, and completely non-negotiable, at which point the mathematics stops entirely and something else takes over, something that does not calculate odds or weigh outcomes or consider exit strategies. Something that simply decides with total clarity that this is the hill. He called it enough. He looked at me when he said it and added, very quietly, "Try not to be standing near whoever triggers it." I was thinking about that conversation when the first Earth transmission came through, 14 hours after the execution. And I want to be very precise about the word transmission, because what I was expecting, what everyone on the monitoring platform was expecting, was a communication. A statement of outrage, a diplomatic recall, maybe a trade sanction strongly worded, with a promise of further consequences pending review. What we received was not a communication. It was a declaration. 712 words. Read aloud by Earth's Secretary General, Dmitry Vasquez-Ose, in a voice so quiet and so even that 3 of my colleagues had to check the audio feed to confirm it was not a recording. No music, no ceremony. Just a man at a podium in a gray suit reading. I will not reproduce the full text here, because some documents are better experienced than summarized. But I will tell you that it began with a single line. The government and people of Earth note the execution of Ambassador Yusra Okonkwo-Bell by the Kailthari High Seat, in violation of every principle of diplomatic law recognized by civilized species. And it ended with this. Earth does not seek war, but Earth does not retreat from it. The Kailthari High Seat has made a choice. Earth has made one too. We are done talking. That was it. No list of demands, no window for negotiation, no offer to resolve the matter peacefully if the right concessions were made. Just a door, closing, with a soft and terrible click. The Kailthari High Seat's response, delivered within the hour, was a masterpiece of miscalculation. High Commander Arekven, speaking in the full regalia of the Kailthari War Council, called the declaration the bluster of a primitive species that has never faced a true military power. He noted that Earth's nearest fleet was 3 weeks out at maximum speed. He noted that the Kailthari had 17 fortified systems, a navy of 800 warships, and 4 centuries of unbroken military dominance in this sector. He laughed, actually laughed, into the camera. For several seconds, one of my colleagues, a Vorathi analyst named Shiel, turned to me after the broadcast and said, "He has never read anything about them, has he?" I said, "I don't think he read our briefing." Shiel said, "I don't think he read any briefing." I said, "I think he is about to read the universe's most expensive lesson on the subject, because here is what Arekven did not know, or did not believe, or simply could not process about the species he had just declared bluster at. Earth's nearest fleet was not 3 weeks out, it was 6 hours out. This requires some explanation. The Kailthari, like most species in this region of the galaxy, operated on the assumption that military logistics worked in a certain way. You receive a provocation. You evaluate. You mobilize. You travel. The gap between provocation and response was, historically, measured in weeks at minimum. This was considered a natural law, a cosmic constant. You couldn't move a fleet of warships like they were sitting in a drawer. Humans, it turned out, had a very different relationship with the concept of natural law. Admiral Priya Chakraborty Nair had been in the Conclave's outer system for 11 days before the execution. Not because Earth had anticipated the execution, though certain intelligence assessments had flagged the deteriorating situation, but because Priya Chakraborty Nair was the kind of officer who believed in being where things were about to happen before things happened. She had 42 ships. Not the full Earth fleet, nowhere near, but 42 ships that had spent 11 days in very quiet, very unremarkable orbit around a gas giant that nobody was watching, running minimal emissions, doing nothing that a passive scan would flag as threatening. She received Vasquez-Ose's declaration at the same moment the rest of the galaxy did. She was already moving before it finished. I know what you're thinking. 42 ships against the Kailthari's 800, against 17 fortified systems, against 4 centuries of military dominance. You are doing the same math Arekven did, and you are arriving at the same answer, which is, this is not a war, this is a gesture. This is humanity filing an angry complaint with the universe, and the universe is going to file it in the bin. I understand why you think that. I thought something similar briefly in the 45 minutes before the first Kailthari border station went offline. Not destroyed, offline, dark, silent. As if someone had simply walked up to it and turned off the lights, which, as it turned out, was almost exactly what had happened. Because while 42 ships is not, by any conventional military calculation, sufficient to assault a fortified border station, it is, when crewed by humans, apparently sufficient to insert a very small team of very calm people through a maintenance access point that the Kael'thari had classified as a non-vulnerability. It had been a non-vulnerability, technically, until an Earth intelligence analyst named Falake Adeyemi Sato had spent 6 weeks building a complete structural model of every Kael'thari border installation from publicly available architectural records and a frankly alarming attention to detail. Falake was 29 years old. She ate something called instant noodles at her desk at 2 in the morning and apparently thought this was a normal life. She had flagged the maintenance access vulnerability in a report 8 months ago. The report had 47 pages of appendices. She had also, in a footnote on page 31, included recommended infiltration timelines for each installation. In the footnote, as an afterthought, the way you might remind someone to pick up milk. The team that took the border station offline was 6 people. They were inside for 22 minutes. They disabled communications, weapons systems, and the station's distress beacon. They left a single message on the station commander's personal terminal, written in perfect Kael'thari script. It said, "First." That was it. Just the word, in their language. On the commander's personal terminal, which was supposed to be physically inaccessible and encrypted to military-grade Kael'thari security standards, just so the message was very, very clear. We were here. You did not know we were here. We were in your most secure room. We could have done anything. We chose to leave a note. The Kael'thari border commander, from what I understand, did not sleep well after that. High Commander Eric Ven's laugh was not quite so loud when the report reached him. Somewhere in the executive complex of the Kael'thari High Seat, in a room I imagine was very quiet and very tense, someone was probably doing new math, frantically, with the growing suspicion that the original answer had been wrong. It had been wrong, but they did not know yet, not fully, not truly, how wrong. That was about to change. Arek Ven made his second mistake 4 hours after the border station went dark. He mobilized 200 warships and sent them toward the estimated position of Admiral Chakraborty Nayar's fleet. It was, strategically speaking, a reasonable response. Overwhelm the smaller force, destroy it publicly, demonstrate that the earlier humiliation was a fluke, restore the narrative, clean, decisive, the kind of move that looks excellent in military textbooks. The problem was that Priya Chakraborty Nayar had already moved, not retreated, moved. There is a difference that I cannot stress enough, because the entire Kael'thari Tactical Command spent approximately 9 hours chasing a debris field and some very convincing electronic ghost signatures before realizing, with a specific variety of horror that has no name in most languages, that they had been hunting a decoy and the actual Earth fleet was currently, and had been for several hours, sitting in perfect silence on the dark side of Kael'thari's second moon, the second moon, which orbited Kael Prime itself. The capital, Shiel, my Vorathi colleague, had gone completely still when the positional data came through on our monitoring feeds. She stared at the display for a long time. Then she said, very softly, "They flew through the entire Kael'thari home system, past 17 patrol routes, past 2 defensive grids, and parked." I said, "Yes," she said. "Without being detected," I said. "Apparently," she said. "How?" And I said, "I have read 4 separate intelligence reports attempting to explain how humans move through defended space, and I still cannot give you a satisfying answer. The closest any analyst has come is a Pelkani researcher who wrote, and I am quoting directly, 'They treat the gaps between attention as architecture.'" Shiel considered this. Then she said, "That's terrifying." I said, "Yes." What came next was not a battle. I want to be accurate about this, because the word battle implies a certain mutuality, 2 forces engaging, exchanging, testing each other across the geometry of conflict. What happened in the Kael'thari home system over the following 18 hours was not that. It was a demonstration, surgical, deliberate, and breathtaking in its restraint, which was somehow the most frightening part of all. Priya Chakraborty Nayar sent a single transmission to Arek Ven before she did anything. 1 sentence, broadcast on his personal command frequency, which was also supposed to be encrypted and inaccessible. She said, We are not here to destroy you. We are here so you understand that we can. Then she waited 4 minutes for a response. There was no response, so she got to work. The Kalthari home system's primary communications array went offline first. Not destroyed, disabled, with a precision that the Conclave's own technical analysts spent 3 days reverse engineering and still could not fully replicate. Then the orbital defense platforms began going dark, one by one, in a sequence that one of my colleagues noted bore a striking resemblance to someone methodically turning off lights in an empty house before leaving. The deep space sensor network followed. The automated resupply routes to the military shipyards were rerouted, the navigation beacons physically repositioned, so that incoming supply ships were now heading, completely unaware, toward empty space, and through all of it, not a single Kalthari ship was destroyed, not one. The crews were evacuated first, in some cases, or simply left unharmed aboard vessels that had been neatly, humiliatingly disabled at the engine level. A Kalthari patrol captain named Veth Oren gave an account later after everything that I found myself returning to repeatedly. She described her ship losing propulsion without warning, without any impact, without any visible cause. She described going to the observation window and seeing in the dark outside absolutely nothing. No ships, no signatures, nothing. And then on the interior of the window, in condensation, drawn with a fingertip from outside, on the vacuum-facing surface of a pressurized viewport, which should have been physically impossible, a small symbol, a human hand, palm open, 5 fingers, the universal gesture that means stop, or wait, or I see you. She said she stood at that window for a very long time. I believe her. In the Kalari High Seats executive complex, Arek Ven was receiving reports in the way that powerful people receive very bad news. In increasingly rapid succession, each one worse than the last, each one demanding a response he did not have. His 200 ships were still searching empty space. His home system's defenses were being quietly disassembled around him. His communications array was down. His resupply network was compromised. And the Earth fleet, 42 ships, 42, he had laughed about 42 ships, was sitting on his moon and had not, technically, fired a single weapon at a single target. His chief military advisor, a seasoned Kalthari strategist named Sova Tel, apparently sat down across from him at some point during hour 14 and said something that the Kalthari have been somewhat reluctant to include in official histories. She said, "They are not fighting us, High Commander. They are showing us what fighting us would look like. Those are different things, and we should be very grateful they are still different things." Arekven, from all accounts, did not speak for a while after that. The request for communication came from the Kalthari High Seat at hour 19. Not a declaration, not a counter-threat. A request. Formal, properly coded, transmitted on conclave diplomatic frequencies, which were still working, because Priya Chakrabarti Nair had left them working, specifically, so this call could be made. The call was not answered by Chakrabarti Nair. She was not a diplomat. She was very clear on this point. Her job was to establish conditions. The diplomats could handle what came next. The call was answered by a man named Kwame Asante Dube, Earth's Deputy Secretary for Interstellar Affairs, who had been traveling aboard one of the support vessels and who now appeared on the Kalthari's screen looking remarkably well-rested for someone in the middle of a military operation. He had reading glasses pushed up on his forehead. He was holding a cup of something hot. He looked, Sovatel noted later, like a man who had been expecting this call for a while and had simply been waiting for it to arrive. He said, "High Seat. You wanted to talk. Not we are willing to discuss terms. Not Earth is prepared to consider. Just, you wanted to talk." 4 words carrying the full weight of everything that was currently parked on their moon. What followed was 6 hours of negotiation, which I am told was actually quite civil, in the tense and exhausting way that conversations are civil when both parties have reached the part of the situation where civility is the only option left. Asante Dube was not cruel. He was not triumphant. He did not gloat, which several Kael'thari officials later admitted, privately, was unexpected and somewhat disorienting, because in their experience, the winning party gloated. It was part of the ritual. The absence of gloating was harder to process than gloating would have been. He simply presented 3 requirements: clear, specific, non-negotiable, but also, and this was the part that Sovatel kept returning to in later interviews, entirely achievable. He was not asking for surrender. He was not asking for territory, resources, political concession, or public humiliation. He was asking for 3 things: formal acknowledgement of wrongful execution entered into conclave record, full diplomatic immunity guarantees for all future Earth representatives, backed by independent monitoring, and a memorial built on Kael Prime at Kael'thari expense to Ambassador Yusra Okonkwo-Bell. That last one sat in the silence for a long time. Arekven himself asked, through intermediaries, whether the memorial requirement could be replaced with a financial reparation. Asante Dobi took a sip of his drink and said, without any particular emphasis, no. Arekven asked whether the location could be somewhere other than Kael Prime. Asante Dube said, no. Arekven was quiet for a moment, and then asked, in a tone that Sovatel described as someone who has run out of cards and knows it, whether there was any flexibility at all on any of the 3 points. Asante Dube said, there was flexibility 6 months ago when Yusra was still alive. There is not flexibility now. The agreement was signed 12 hours later. All 3 requirements, unmodified. Priya Chakraborty Nair pulled her fleet back from the moon in a formation that every Kael'thari military observer described, with considerable discomfort, as unhurried. Like someone finishing a meal and folding their napkin. No drama, no final display of force. Just 42 ships, turning and leaving, having done exactly what they came to do and not one thing more. I was on the monitoring platform for all of it. I filed my reports. I maintained my neutrality, professionally speaking. But I will tell you what I wrote in my personal log that night, because I think it captures something important. I wrote, the Kael'thari expected humanity to be angry. They were. The Kael'thari expected humanity to be dangerous. They were. What the Kael'thari did not expect, what I did not fully expect, was that humanity would be precise. There is a species here that can reach into your home system, take apart your defenses piece by piece, leave your people unharmed, and then sit quietly on your moon until you are ready to have a conversation. That is not a military posture. That is a philosophy. I am not entirely sure I understand it, but I am very sure I respect it. The memorial was completed 14 months later. It stands in the civic center of Kael Prime's capital, which I imagine is a daily experience of remarkable complexity for the Kael'thari who pass it. It is by all accounts beautiful, because the Kael'thari are extraordinarily skilled artists, whatever their other failings, and because the designer, a Kael'thari sculptor named Eti Vor, apparently researched Yusra Okonkwo-Bell exhaustively before beginning, and was so affected by what she found that she worked on it for 9 months without pause. The sculpture shows a woman mid-stride, locks pinned back, a small hummingbird clip rendered in extraordinary detail at the side of her head, one hand slightly forward as if she has just made a point in a negotiation and is waiting for the other side to catch up. Her face is calm and certain and looking at something in the middle distance that only she can see. On the base, at Asante Dube's specific request, is a single line in both Kael'thari script and English. It reads, "She was here to help you, remember that." Arekven was removed from command 8 months after the agreement, for reasons the Kael'thari officially describe as restructuring of strategic leadership priorities. He was replaced by a significantly younger officer who, by all reports, reads conclave briefings very thoroughly, maintains an extensive personal library on human history and behavior, and has framed above her desk a copy of the 712-word declaration that Dimitri Vasquez Osei read in a gray suit with a quiet voice. When asked why, she apparently said, "So I remember what it sounds like when they stop talking." Sovatel retired. She wrote a memoir. It sold extremely well throughout the conclave, and was particularly popular, somewhat awkwardly, on Earth. In the acknowledgments, she thanked, among others, Yusra Okonkwo-Bell, who I never met and who deserved better from all of us. Folike Adeyemi Sato got a promotion. She is currently the head of Earth Strategic Infrastructure Analysis Division, which has grown considerably in budget and staff since the Kalthari incident. She still eats instant noodles at 2 in the morning. Some things, I am told, do not change, and Priya Chakraborty Nair, when asked by a conclave journalist what she would say to the Kalthari High Command if she could say anything, thought about it for a moment, then shrugged and said, "I already said it. I said it before I started. They just didn't think I meant it." She meant it. They all meant it. That is the thing about humans. The thing I keep writing in reports and briefings and personal logs. The thing I have been trying to articulate for years in language that other species can actually absorb. They are not the most numerous, not the oldest, not the most technologically advanced or the most diplomatically sophisticated or the most anything, by most conventional measurements, but they mean it every single time. And in a galaxy full of civilizations that learned long ago to say things carefully, to threaten conditionally, to position and posture and hedge, a species that simply means what it says is, quietly, the most dangerous thing in the room. The Kalthari know that now. I suspect they will not forget it.